Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu finished a 4-country African visit. Netanyahu started his trip in Uganda on July 4th, the day that marked the 40th anniversary of the heroic rescue in Entebbe, where, in 1976, his brother Yoni was killed while leading the historic and dazzling mission. This is the first time an Israeli Prime Minister visited the sub-Saharan African region in over 3 decades. Israel has a long history of aid and involvement in Africa, especially dealing with technology, water, and agriculture. Most of those interactions have been behind the scenes and kept very quiet. Israel is now ready to open a new era in their relationship with that region. Part of Israel's objective is also to challenge ISIS and radical Islam. Africa is the future, and Israel needs to have a presence. So, Prime Minister Netanyahu visited Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, and Ethiopia, a truly historic mission of its own. There are many dangers involving traveling, and an assassination attempt against the Israeli Prime Minister was actually uncovered while he was in Uganda. Some countries also think it's dangerous to travel to the United States. 2 Mideast countries have issued travel alerts about the United States. Add to that the Bahamas, which also said that their citizens should exercise judgment and avoid protests and any interaction with police while in the United States. The United Arab Emirates, the embassy in Washington, D.C., has issued a warning that their citizens should stay away from big city protests. In addition, the government of Bahrain tweeted that their citizens should maintain distance from protests in the United States. There is no real threat to citizens in the United States, especially relative to the dangers in the Middle East. The United States is safe for Americans and for tourists. The subtext of the warnings these governments are releasing is that Black Lives Matter, that movement, and their protests are likely to be violent, and police are on edge, and they may react, which could lead to more deaths. I've also been thinking about Iraq and ISIS. Iraqi forces recaptured a northern airbase from the Islamic State, a victory hailed as key in the long-awaited operation to retake the northern city of Mosul. In a statement issued by his website, the Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi, described the airbase in the town of Qayyara as an important base to liberate Mosul, and called on Mosul residents to get ready for the liberation of their areas. Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, fell to ISIS in the summer of 2014, when ISIS captured large swaths of northern and western Iraq. In late March, Iraqi forces launched an operation aimed at dislodging ISIS from areas to the south and southeast of Mosul and gradually cutting off the city's supply lines. In the mostly Sunni province of Anbar, west of Baghdad, government troops consolidated their grip on the provincial capital of Ramadi, retaken from ISIS last year, when they captured 2 villages just north of that city. The ISIS group was pushed out of the Anbar city of Fallujah last month after holding it more than 2 years. But despite recent territorial losses in both Iraq and Syria, where the group has established its self-proclaimed caliphate, ISIS has demonstrated its continued ability to launch offensive attacks in Iraq. ISIS still holds large pockets of territory in northern and western Iraq. Recently, a massive truck bombing in Baghdad killed at least 200 people in the predominantly Shiite neighborhood, the deadliest attack in Iraq since 2003 and the U.S. invasion. And later that week, an attack at a Shiite shrine north of Baghdad killed 37 people. ISIS has claimed responsibility for both attacks. An important State Department security report was recently released. Here are some of the highlights. 2 years since it shifted from terrorist group to governing organization holding territory, the Islamic State is expanding to 7 emerging areas of Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia. In addition to establishing its base in Syria and Iraq and naming official provinces in numerous countries, ISIS has demonstrated a heightened capability to carry out and operate in the 7 countries. The report by the Overseas Security Advisory Council states, The Council is a State Department organization that provides security support to American businesses operating overseas. The 7 new threats of operation are Turkey, Tunisia, Lebanon, France, Belgium, Bangladesh, and the Philippines. ISIS is active in other locations as well, but the 7 locations represent areas where there is expected to be a continued interest in operations, support, networking, and the likelihood for more than one off attack, the report states. Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared a caliphate in June 2014. Since then, the group has sought to establish political and military authority over the entire Muslim world. The Islamic State group has named wilayats, or provinces, of the caliphate that attracted the loyalty of a number of former al-Qaeda affiliates. The terrorist group uses a centralized decision-making, but a decentralized attack system under which local terrorists choose tactics and targets. ISIS promotes an idea that the apocalypse will be brought about following a major victory in the Syrian city of Dabiq, the report says. It also says, 2 years after declaring their caliphate, the group has declared numerous wilayats globally, inspired several lone wolf-style attacks abroad, orchestrated complex coordinated attacks in Europe, and maintains control of a large swath of territory in Iraq and Syria. The most recent attacks included the nightclub massacre in Orlando, the shootings and suicide bombings at Istanbul Ataturk Airport, and the massive suicide bombing in Baghdad. The Syrian conflict, according to the report, has produced an unprecedented number of jihadis, far more than earlier Islamic conflicts in Afghanistan, Bosnia, Somalia, and even Chechnya. From 2011 to 2016, between 27,000 and 31,000 foreign jihadis from 86 nations joined the Islamic group in Syria and Iraq. The foreign fighter flow came from 6 major states: Tunisia with 6,000, Saudi Arabia 2,500, Russia 2,400, Turkey 2,100, Jordan 2,000, France 1,700, and an estimated 280 foreign fighters joined the Islamic State from North America. ISIS is the most successful and active terrorist group in the use of the internet for recruitment and propaganda, but it has not shown the ability to conduct major cyber attacks despite aspirations to do so. The report says, analysts agree that ISIL displays the intent to conduct cyber attacks against the energy grid, nuclear facilities, or other critical infrastructure systems, but there is currently little evidence to show that ISIL possesses this capability. Despite its successes, ISIS, which controlled about 1/3 of Iraq and Syria and 9 million people at the end of 2014, lost about 22% of that territory early this year. The report noted, the Islamic State is estimated to deploy 19,000 fighters in Iraq and Syria, and the flow of foreign fighters appears to be on the decline, but that number could fluctuate significantly, according to the State Department report. Key operating areas outside of Syria and Iraq include Libya, where up to 3,000 Islamic State fighters have controlled a 120-mile stretch of territory around the coastal city of Sirte. Libya has become a regional hub for recruitment of foreign fighters, with ISIL's Libya elements training regional operatives, the report said. In Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, the Islamic State-affiliated group Ansar Beit al-Maqdis has some 1,000 fighters. Another 300 Islamic State fighters are operating in Yemen, and Islamic State terrorists mainly have targeted Shiites in the eastern part of Saudi Arabia. In Africa, Boko Haram has pledged loyalty to the Islamic State. In Russia, Caucasus region, the Islamic State has the Kavkaz province, which has absorbed a number of Islamic groups. The Afghanistan affiliate is the Khorasan province, and the Algerian affiliate is a breakaway element of al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up is a transcript of a Middle East expert testifying in front of the United States Congressional House Committee on Foreign Affairs in Washington, D.C. on July 6, 2016. The expert is David Pollock. He is the Kaufman Fellow at the Washington Institute and the director of the Fikra forum. He is a former State Department advisor on the Middle East. Pollock is suggesting changing the whole paradigm in order to move the Palestinian-Israeli issue and wondering what can be done. Pollock begins by setting the stage. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, honorable colleagues, and distinguished fellow speakers for this opportunity to meet with you today. I'm truly honored by it, and I greatly appreciate both this very prestigious forum and the significance of the issue at hand. As I see it, our primary task here is not to debate the underlying issues of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or of past U.S. policy in that regard. Rather, we should focus mainly on these two narrower questions. Is now a good time for major U.S. or other initiatives on that perennial problem? And if not, how can we best help preserve the possibilities of a more constructive approach to the Israeli-Palestinian problem at some future time? It's a cliché, but nonetheless true, that the original guiding principle of any serious endeavor should be, first do no harm. But that is simply not the case today. This conflict is now a marginal one, even from the Arab standpoint, and certainly from the American one. It's nowhere near as acute or as consequential, even in the Middle East, as the conflicts against ISIL or among sects and ethnic groups in nearby Syria, Iraq, Turkey, Lebanon, Egypt, and beyond. And it is vital to note that, contrary to common misconception, all those conflicts have almost nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian one. Therefore, today, it is not just that we should pay more urgent attention to those other conflicts rather than the Israeli-Palestinian one. Pollock is correct. There is little regional interest, and there are far more pressing issues than the Israeli-Palestinian one. Pollock then lists a series of steps that the United States should insist that both parties do in order to move the process ahead. The ideas are very good, but the problem is that it requires both the Israelis and the Palestinians to actually do things. The PA has not really been interested lately. In order to accomplish this, pressure needs to be brought on the PA. Second up is a column from Israel National News, also known as Arutz Sheva. It's a column by Manfred Gerstenfeld. It was published July 7, 2016. The writer has been a long-term advisor on strategy issues to the boards of several major multinational corporations in Europe and North America. He is board member and former chairman of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs and recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award of the Journal for the Study of Anti-Semitism. This piece is a biting condemnation of the Dutch. It is entitled, "The Dutch Apologize to Javans and Bosnians, but not to Dutch Jews." Gerstenfeld begins, "With each apology and admission of guilt, the refusal to do the same about the heartless attitude to Dutch Jews during the Holocaust becomes more poignant. The Dutch wartime government in exile in London has scandalously ignored its own murderous persecution of Jewish citizens in the occupied Netherlands by the Germans. This is a well-documented historical fact." The author then explains that the Dutch are apologizing for past evils that they were involved in, but not at all for their role in the Holocaust. The author then explains just how tepid their Holocaust comments were when they delivered their so-called apology in Jerusalem at the Knesset after a visit to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial, and was delivered by Queen Beatrix. The author continues, "On several occasions, Dutch parliamentarians have put questions to the Dutch Prime Minister on the absence of apologies to the Jewish community for the continued failure of the wartime Dutch government. In one of his answers, Rutte said that the government stood behind a statement made about the issue by then Queen Beatrix in the Knesset in 1995. That glib text read, 'We know that many of our fellow countrymen put up courageous and sometimes successful resistance, and often exposing themselves to mortal danger, stood by their threatened fellow man. During our visit to Yad Vashem yesterday, we saw their names, too, among the remembered forever under the trees planted there. But we also know that they were the exceptional ones, that the people of the Netherlands could not prevent the destruction of their fellow Jewish citizens.'" Gerstenfeld is correct. This is hardly a serious comment about the history of Denmark during the Holocaust. The rule of thumb in dealing with the subject of Denmark and the Holocaust is to understand that, yes, Anne Frank was hidden by her neighbors, but she was also betrayed and informed on by other neighbors, and hence deported and murdered. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show 3 cartoons today. The first is by Jack Ohman and the Tribune News Service. It was published on July 8th, 2016. The cartoon makes fun of Donald Trump and his Twitter feed that poked fun at Hillary Clinton with a caption inside the Star of David. His team, Donald Trump's team, asserted that the star was a sheriff's star. So this cartoon has Trump in a sheriff's office, with sheriffs all around him wearing yellow stars of David. Trump is saying as he walks around, "Hey, nice synagogue." Interestingly, he has extra tiny hands in the cartoon, and his hair is the same color as the stars of David. The themes of the cartoons number 2 and cartoon number 3 are very, very similar. They focus on the lack of understanding that the federal government and our leaders have toward ISIS. This second cartoon is drawn by Desiree Hewitt on June 29th, 2016, and was published in the Special Forces Operations Report. It's a newspaper. In this cartoon, Attorney General Lynch says to 2 terrorists, "Love and compassion are the best responses to terrorism. Now give me a big hug, you big." And then she pauses as she says, "What?" Meanwhile, one of the terrorists hacks off her hands with a huge sword. And the second terrorist says, "Right back at you, blank." The scary part of this entire cartoon is the response of the Department of Justice, which is literally said that the best response to terror is love and compassion. The final cartoon shows a similar theme. It was drawn by Bob Gorell and was published in Creator Syndicate on June 23rd, 2016, but in the New York Post a week and a half later on July 4th. Attorney General Lynch is in the frame, and the printout is a dialogue of the Orlando shooter who says, Orlando shooter, "I'm an Islamic soldier." Orlando shooter, "I pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi." Orlando shooter, "America must stop its bombing of Syria and Iraq." Orlando shooter, "Allahu Akbar." After all these quotes from the Orlando shooter, Attorney General Lynch says, "We may never know his true motive." And the words "true motive" are written in blood red. Again, this would be funny if it were a joke, but these lines are the real words spoken by the Orlando shooter and the United States Attorney General. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, has invited a group of Israeli and Jewish leaders from Arab lands to meet with him. The group, which is made of 70 leaders from the World Federation of Moroccan Jewry, has already met with Abbas several times. Their meetings have been very productive and have helped to move issues and dialogues along. This time, however, the group rejected the invitation from Abbas. The leader of the group, Sam Ben-Shitrit, said that they would not meet with Abbas until the Palestinian Authority president publicly condemned the recent stabbing of Halel Yafa Ariel, the 13-year-old Israeli girl stabbed to death by a Palestinian terrorist while in her bed. Ben-Shitrit also pointed out that Abbas refused to meet with Israeli President Rivlin in Europe at the EU meeting. And finally, Ben-Shitrit explained that after their last meeting, the previous meeting, with the PA president, he, the Shitrit, wrote a letter to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu paving the road for a face-to-face meeting with Abbas. But Abbas still has not pursued the meeting. Ben-Shitrit feels that it is not useful to continue meeting with the head of the Palestinian Authority when Abbas does not follow through with their previous agreements. The Olympics are scheduled for August this summer. It looks like the hacker community is talking a lot about the Olympics. These hackers are not out to wreak havoc and terror on the Olympics. These hackers are selling knockoff tickets and other memorabilia. Hackers are luring people into honey traps by offering travel packages that include flights, hotels, tickets to the games, and they're all fake. This is the classic hacker model. Most black hat hackers are after a quick buck. They almost always go after simple and easy money. Most hackers are petty thieves and con artists, not evil masterminds. They lead people down a path, deceive them, and simply steal from them by enticing them with the excitement of the con. The hacker community is talking about their plans in great detail. Caveat emptor, we say in Latin. Buyer beware. The Euro Cup soccer match was played recently, the finals. It was watched all across the Middle East. Like the World Cup or the Mondial, as it's called, hundreds of millions of people tune in to watch the final game. For the purpose of our discussion, it does not matter who won or lost the Euro Cup. It is about watching the game. What matters is that the Supreme Court of Israel decided that Hamas prisoners convicted of mass murder and terrorism were entitled to watch the game. The families of the victims of the crimes perpetrated by these prisoners petitioned the High Court to disallow them the pleasure of taking in the game. But the court ruled in favor of the prisoners. Call me crazy, but I don't believe that the pleasures of watching games should be rights. They should be rewards for cooperation, insight, and information. Watching the Euro Cup could have been used as an incentive to leverage information from prisoners. Now watching soccer has become a right. What's next? What a totally missed opportunity. Israel is advancing legislation now to limit hate speech on Facebook and other social media. They want to scrub it. Israeli Minister of Public Security Gilad Erdan said, quote, "Some of the victims' blood is on Zuckerberg's hands." Facebook has turned into a monster. The younger generation in the Palestinian Authority runs its entire discourse of incitement and lies and finally goes out to commit murderous acts on Facebook's platform. There is much support for these laws, and not just by Israelis. The evidence seems pretty clear that there are direct links between terrorists, their Facebook accounts, and the incitement that they're exposed to. Normally we would say that people still have the ability to choose between good and evil and right and wrong. That's just because, for example, someone who watches horror movies doesn't immediately turn into a potential mass murderer. But in defiance of all logic, these kids are different. For some reason, these young Palestinian kids who go out and become terrorists seem to be different and are motivated by their Facebook pages. Hackers are starting to ask questions about cyber terror. Hacktivist, the online hacker journal, published an essay saying that new definitions for cyber terror are important for cyber attacks, and they really don't meet the current criteria. The current definition, according to the journal, reads, "An act must be illegal and violent or endanger human life, be coercive or intimidating, and occur in whichever jurisdiction fits." The code does not say that terrorism must meet one or all, but means activities with these three characteristics. Most acts of hacktivism only tick one or two of these boxes, if at all. They're correct. Most cyber hacks are illegal, but not terror. Most cyber hacks are denial of service, when they flood a website and bring it down. That makes for a minor inconvenience and an illegal act, but hardly an act of terror. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that Anne Frank's Diary of a Young Girl is one of the most discussed books in the world? It's been translated into over 60 languages. The diary is her thoughts and ideas dating from June 1942, when the family goes into hiding, until August 1944, when they were betrayed and deported to the camps. The diary was discovered by her father, Otto, who was the only family member to survive the Holocaust. He received it from Anne Frank's friend, Miep. The diary also asks the really big questions about good and evil. In the midst of hiding in the secret room behind the bookcase in the top floor, Anne, this 12 to 14-year-old girl, asked some of the most important philosophical questions plaguing all who study the Holocaust. Otto, her father, edited the diary. He took out some of the ideas that he feared might reduce the value of the diary. It was a mistake. Like any 14-year-old girl, Anne wrote and thought about sex and boys and interactions. These ideas should have been kept in the diary. they would have been even more important and shown more depth and character. Unfortunately, taking it out fed into the conspiratorialists and the Holocaust deniers who say the book is a fabrication, and it drew into question Anne Frank's very authenticity. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.